I'm very excited to introduce my dear friend Noa Tishby to you all. Mark gave you a little tiny bit of what she is. In the business, we call Noa a multi-hyphenate. She's a talented actress, award-winning producer who helped shepherd many Israeli projects into American television, a no-holds-barred activist, a talk show host, and now, as Mark said, the author of a very important book, Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. We're privileged to have her, and I want to introduce you to my friend, Noa Tishby. Hello, Noa.
Hi, Jay. So good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. This is all an out-of-body experience in a way, this thing, having the book out and starting to get responses from people and starting to see the impact that it's having. It's extraordinary.
And it's strange, right? Yeah, it's strange. We're 20 minutes away from each other, but we're talking to each other on Zoom, as well as the hundreds of people that are joining us. So you are a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. And I'm not going to ask you why you wrote the book at this point, but I'm going to ask you in a way why your story is so important for people to know, because so much of the book is not just about Israel. It's about Noa Tishby.
Yeah, it's about me and it's about my family. So I think that's the most powerful tool that I use there. So why I wrote the book is because obviously we all, as both of you said, Israel's hard to explain. We always find ourselves in a situation in which we're having conversations with people. We get emotional. We try to explain it to our kids, to our grandkids. They try to explain it to their friends. And I have found a way to kind of explain it in a way that's simple. And as always, right? People relate to personal stories. Like we all kind of walk around, the younger you are, the more you think that your problems are uniquely your own. And if people would know about your, the hidden places in your personality and your psyche, it's like, oh my God, I'm the only person feeling like that. The older you get, you're like, oh, that's adorable. All of us are insecure. All of us have issues. That's so cute. And you kind of are more open, sharing about these things. And that's what makes people feel connected to any material. You're a storyteller. We live in LA. That's the number one thing in every TV show, movie, book, any novel, anything. And telling my story became my family's story, which is very involved in Zionism and establishing the country, became the access point from which people could listen to the story anew. So one of the things that I'm finding very exciting is that even people that know everything that there is to know about Israel, they still find the book still informative and also entertaining. So it wasn't my intention to insert myself or my family that much. At the beginning, when I started the process, it was more about telling the story of Israel and the history of Israel in a way that's easy to understand, because I found that I know how to do this after years of working in the field and working in entertainment and storytelling and, writing and crafting materials, other writers' material as a producer. I found a way to tell the story of Israel. But then when I started working with my agent and then with my publisher at Simon & Schuster, they were the ones who really pushed me to put myself in there more as an access point to a reader. So it wasn't what I intended to do, but it just became a very powerful. I'm glad they pushed me to it, because first of all, I feel very it feels really nice to stand in all the vulnerabilities of myself as a person and Israel as a country and acknowledging all of them. And there's something kind of, it feels very authentic to my readers. So I know that whoever reads this book knows me. And then they also know me.
So a big part of, we can certainly talk about your venture from Israel, Tel Aviv to Hollywood, but I want to talk about the activism piece, because I have a very strong memory of a Rosh Hashanah lunch where you said, watch out for my mother. And then your mother came around the corner and she really went after me big time, because she really is a passionate person.
She really is. And I talk about her a lot in the book. And I love now that people come to me like, oh my God, I have to meet your mom. I'm like, I know you really do. It's in my DNA, this whole thing of stepping up, ruffling feathers, as I say in the book, arm yourself with good facts and go get yourself in good trouble. right? She's amazing. I call her, she's a ninja. She really is. She really is. She's a kibbutz girl. She's very smart, very strong. She has short hair, never pierced her ears, never wore makeup in her life. Was a swimmer, was a marine biologist. She specializes in ballistic missiles now. She's retired, but she decided to volunteer her time with analyzing ballistic missiles and what is a better defense for Israel than Iron Dome. She is out there. So she's incredible. And yeah, you met her, she's a hurricane.
And look, most people that know you from your on-screen work, working in a movie with Matthew McConaughey and then writing this book, I don't know if people would have recognized you and the seriousness of you being committed to the cause of telling Israel's story and supporting Israel.
Yeah, thank you. The responses to the book have been divided to people who know me intimately and have known me for years, and the people who don't know me or just know me from media or from work as an actress or producer or a host or whatever. It was pretty much like this. Everybody that doesn't know me were like, "What? You're doing a what? How does that make sense?" And everybody that knows me for a while, my friends and family were like, "Oh, of course you do that." So it's one of those things where it's different in the US because I'm not well known in the US. I have a lot of friends in the community and maybe people have heard of me in our community, but I'm not I'm not famous in America by any stretch of the imagination. And I love self-deprecating humor and actually say that in the book. At some point, I'm like, just in case you didn't realize, I did not end up becoming Gal Gadot, right? So I'm like, it's not like I'm a big personality here, kind of known, but not really. But in Israel, it was a little bit of a shock for a lot of people, but not the people who know me, because they know that I've been doing the work for many, many, many years and doing a very deep dive and doing a very serious, thorough research into not just the history and the true story, but then bringing in my experience as a storyteller and as a producer and a writer to be able to merge these two things together, the historical fact and a narrative that's entertaining and engaging. So it was a surprise to people who don't know me, but those who do were like.
Well, and I think the one thing that people need to know about you is that, and the thing that I love about you the most is that we both have been committed to bridging that gap between Hollywood and Israel for our careers. And before I was at the Federation, it was a big part of what I cared about. And as far as I'm concerned, you are one of the people that no one really knows about that really solidified Israel's role in American media and in Hollywood. And you deserve so much credit for that. And I love that it's part of the book, and I love that you told the story. I think that one of the stories that's really great that I was a little sad to read in the book because I felt like it was a person, I knew it, I didn't want everyone to know it. And I think our audience would love to know that everybody has an epiphany, and you had an epiphany about your Jewish identity living in LA. And it's a great story, and I'd love it for you to share it to our audience.
So that story, for example, which I'll tell in a second, that story, when I wrote the book at the beginning, I had it as a little anecdote at the end of the book. And my editor read it. She read the book. She's like, no. This story is moving to the beginning of the book. This is an originating story for you. Like, you're expanding on it. I want to see a lot about that story, and I want you to put it at the beginning of the book. And my God, she was right, because so many people react to it. So, I mean, responding to it and relating to it a lot. So the story goes like this, right? So it was my first couple of months in LA. It wasn't like literally a couple of months. I was in LA. I had an Australian boyfriend. I stayed at his house that night. I wake up in the morning, the phone rings, I pick up the phone, and my family is on the line from Israel, and they go, "Happy holiday." And I'm like, "Happy holiday? What holiday is, what's happening?" And they're like, "Oh, it's Rosh Hashanah tonight." And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I sat with the phone with a cup of coffee, and I'm like, oh no. And like, they pass the phone on at the table, and everybody says, "Happy holiday, happy holiday, happy Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova, Shana Tova, Shana. And I have the whole image of in my head of the family together and like everybody wearing white and the streets. And I'm like, I'm just in LA in like the Hollywood Hills home with an Australian boyfriend. Oh my God. And I hang up the phone. I'm kind of distraught. And I go to my boyfriend. I said, listen, there's a holiday tonight. I'd like for us to do something tonight. And he's like, great, what would you like to do? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe go to dinner. And I don't, literally no idea, right? Maybe go to dinner or something. And he's like, okay, yeah, sure. Should we invite Millie? And I'm like, yeah, okay, great. So I'm like, I'm again, not present to what's actually happening. The evening comes, we go to Katsuya on Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles. It's me, my a Church of England Australian boyfriend, my other British girl, like Catholic girlfriend. We're sitting at a sushi restaurant on Ventura Boulevard in LA, and we're sitting down, and they're like, all right, what are we celebrating today? And I'm like, they're super nice, right? They're trying to help me out, right? I'm like, we're celebrating Rosh Hashanah. They're like, great. And they're like, what is that? And I said, oh, it's a Jewish New Year's Eve. And they're like, great. What does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I had no idea. I didn't know what to tell them. I didn't know why it was, I didn't know what, I had no idea what I'm celebrating. And I had no idea what I was dumbfounded, didn't have words. And I was so devastated by that story because what it made me understand is that as a secular Israeli, you don't think about the meaning of the holidays. And moving to America, I'm like, I'm a globalist. I'm an Israeli of the thing, but I'm like, not putting any thought into it. And that particular incident of that night sent me on a journey, propelled me onto like a trip that brought me to today. I committed that night that this is never going to happen again. I turned into what my friends would call Rabbitson Noah or Rabbitson Tishby, right? And I'm talking, this was like early 20s in like a 2-bedroom apartment on like Genesee with a roommate, right? I'm like, we're having huge Passovers, huge Rosh Hashanahs. I had one time 54 people for a Rosh Hashanah dinner in my apartment with a roommate in West Hollywood. There was no room in the apartment. So I'm like, okay, fine. We're getting rid of all the furniture. We got rid of all the furniture. We had a Moroccan style on the floor. I really took that on as a part of our responsibility to know where I come from. It became a real calling to just be responsible for my ancestry. And in that process, I'm like, wow, Judaism is amazing. Oh my God, Israel is such a miracle. Like all these things that I had to rediscover for myself. And it was extraordinary. It gave my life meaning. It gave me the roots, the responsibility, again, ancestral responsibility. And it allowed me to get onto that process of 20 years that brought me to this book. And to today, and to this book, and being able to communicate this to a large group of people, because I don't come from a conservative background. It wasn't indoctrinated into me. I come from kind of like a modern kind of take, and I come at it from a different place, but reaching the same conclusion.
So Noah, I don't want anybody to buy the book. No one should buy the book. I want people to buy 5 books. 5 books.
Yes.
One for themselves, 2 for their Jewish friends, and 2 for their non-Jewish friends. Everybody that's listening should buy 5 books. Now, you wrote this book, and I know you, so I know you didn't know every single thing in the book. So I'm wondering, what did you learn from writing the book? What made you different about the experience of writing the book?
So there are 2 things. The thing that made me different is I didn't know how much I'm going to enjoy it. You know, you get on the process. I really enjoyed the book proposal. The responses to the book proposal were great. Then I got the deal pretty quickly with this big publication with Simon & Schuster. And then I'm like, ooh, I'm going to have to write the book now. And I was in a little bit of a concern until I sat down. I'm like, oh, this is actually amazing. So the process was very, very enjoyable. Very, very inspiring and incredible. I did know a lot of the things. I knew where to look, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like unfair. It's not like I came into the subject, having to research everything from scratch. I kind of knew where I need to look. But there were a couple, are you talking about from historical perspective, from the storytelling perspective, stuff that surprised you?
I'm honestly talking about the fact that you and I, we've been taking people to Israel for a long time. We've been prophets, right? The two of us. And I'm wondering, you went through a process of writing this book, and what did you learn about yourself? And what did you learn about Israel that makes you different today?
So I think myself is how much I enjoy the process. This was a real, I've had a couple of people, I talk about that in the acknowledgments of the book, that have told me for years, you're an author. Why are you wasting your time? You're an author, right? And I'm like, really? I don't know. But as soon as I started writing it, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. It's so what I always needed to do. I just needed just the right time to start it. So that's the first thing. And in terms of Israel, I think it's hard to tell specifically, but I did, after the process of the book, I did get really rooted in the knowledge of just how miraculous it is, the concept of a Jewish state reemerging with the Hebrew language reemerging. And like that was, when I went down the history again to details and kind of like the nitty gritty, and you see how many times this could have gone wrong from before the state was established, from the beginning of the Zionist movement, all the way through now. There were so many left or right turns, or a war here, an attack there, or a decision here, a decision there, that could have made it not happen, that it just really reinforced my deep knowledge of how miraculous Israel is, and how important that it is safe, secure, and prosperous, not just for the Jewish people, but for like the world.
And what's the log line? What's the, if you're bumping into someone in the street and you want to tell them to get the book, what's the one thing you're going to say about the book?
Okay, so here it is, right? So the thesis of the book is as follows, right? It's basically this: if you are a person who loves democracy, human rights, women's rights, any kind of like freedom of speech, any of that, and especially if you're a liberal, if you think of yourself as a liberal, that in the sense of like conservative and democratic or Republican, just like a liberal person, right? You have to support Israel within the context of the Middle East. Let me explain why. I usually use a little bit more of a foul language when I say that.
Well, we can't do foul language. We've already established
I
that.
know.
Federation thing.
The problem is that we have found out in the US in recent 10, 15 years is that, unfortunately, especially in progressive circles, Israel's branded as the bad guys. And that obviously couldn't be more like farther from the truth. So I'm speaking from the point of view of someone who's a little bit more liberal, younger. Let me tell you why you're wrong. You guys are wrong. You have all your facts wrong. In fact, you're being manipulated and played by nefarious voices and nefarious powers that don't want Israel to exist. Let me explain why. So if you're a person of democracy, you need to support Israel within the context of the Middle East. You have to support Israel, period, end of story.
And how do you answer the question, you love Israel so much, Noah, why do you live in the States?
I live in the States because there's a line in Hebrew, and I've asked myself that question many times. I strongly feel like first of all, I love LA. That's number one. But number two, and I love America. I'm American, right? I'm an American Israeli. But number two, there's a saying in Hebrew, "En avi be'iro," meaning there's no prophet in his own city. And I do feel like I'm being very helpful for Israel from here, arguably more helpful than I would have been had I been living there. So, there's that. I feel like I'm doing a lot of good and have been in the past few years. Like if I'd been living in Israel, how would I have sold in treatment and created the entertainment market and all the money and GDP growth and jobs over there and over here that have happened because of that? Like that wouldn't have happened had I stayed there. So.
All right. Before we have
and by the way, pre-COVID, I was like dividing my time and going to Israel 3-4 times a year. So I felt like I'm getting the best of both worlds. Now with COVID, a little less, but hopefully we'll get back to that soon.
So let's assume nobody's listening but you and me. I'm just wondering.
Oh,
I've been
are people
thinking about
listening? I didn't realize
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking about this when I was finishing the book. You know, I'm going to be leaving my job as the president and the CEO of the Jewish Federation at the end of the year, and people have been bugging me to go back, you know, into the media. I'm wondering if we can make a deal right now where I can option the book to make the book into a movie.
Oh my God. Wow. We should definitely talk about that. Let's talk about that because that's so funny. Sure. And let's talk, and I need to tell you what I've actually been approached by, just between you and me and 215 people that are listening. I'm getting approached by this and I'm starting to realize what this needs to be in terms of a movie, but
because I've been thinking I know a great actress to play Noa Tishby.
You do?
Saying. Yeah.
Let me know. No,
all right. So I could talk to you for a very long time, and I will have more than this opportunity to do that. So we have three amazing young people who have questions for you. They are products of the Federation system, gone through our programs. They are the best of the best. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I'm going to turn to the first one, who is a change maker, and her name is Zoe Katz. And so Zoe has a question for you, Noah.
Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Noah. So Israel just had its fourth election in 2 years, and it's still unclear if a governing coalition will be formed. Political and religious issues seem to divide Israel and the diaspora. How do we bridge this gap, and what role can Israelis living in the US play here?
The role that Israelis can play here, I'm actually not sure. There's a real stalemate in the political situation right now, but I actually think that on some level, this is proving my point. Like the point has been for so long, Israel is the single consistent democracy in the Middle East. I mean, it's so democratic, it's almost ungovernable. Like it's just so democratic. So it's funny because it's like, where else is it happening in the rest of the Middle East? Nowhere. That's laughing aside. It's a bit of a stalemate. It's a problematic situation. Again, to help the cause of people saying Israel is X, Y, and Z, especially, you know, to help the people who say Israel is an apartheid state, whether or not there's going to be a government is actually dependent on the Arab parties right now. So I don't know how that would be considered apartheid. So that also helps to the cause of proving that Israel is like the most flourishing, insane, active democracy in the Middle East, probably in the world. I'm not sure how Israelis in the US can be helpful, to be honest. I think that pretty much everybody understand what needs to happen and for the stalemate to open up, but I have never endorsed a political candidate within Israel, not in Israel and not abroad. I never said negative things about anybody. So I try to make sure that I'm non-political, that everybody knows I'm a Zionist, period, end of story. That's what I am. So, and I'm just not sure that Israelis abroad can actually contribute to that. I do talk in my book about the religious, especially the Haredim. I always joke that in terms of people reading my book, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're on the right political spectrum or left political spectrum within Israel, you'll be happy, you'll be pleased with the book. But the Haredi people, specifically the political structure, is the one place where I am actually voicing a very clear opinion that is not positive. I think something needs to be done about the education system as it pertains to the Haredi people in Israel. So that is something that can and should be resolved.
Well, thanks, Zoe. And we now have somebody from UCLA, no, and very close to where you are right now, and someone who grew up very close to where your family grew up, Neve Cohen, who's an Israel fellow from UCLA. Neve, what's your question?
Hi, all the way from West Hollywood, where your story began. In your book, you speak about the situation in college campuses. What is your advice for students in the campuses today, and also to new arriving Israeli shlichim like us?
Okay, so for college campuses, I think the generation of the parents, like the parents and the grandparents, need to wake up. Like we've been sleeping on the wheel about what's been happening in colleges for like 15 years. And slowly, the infiltration of the boycott movement is causing real damage. I was on a Clubhouse room the other day and this girl came up and she said, you know, look, I'm going to college. I'm a proud Zionist, but I don't think I want to become an activist, but I also don't want to shy away from my Zionism. And I said, honey, I'm sorry. I have bad news for you. I mean, bad news and good news. You don't have a choice. Like if you want to speak up and if you don't want to be, if you don't want to hide the fact that you're a Zionist, you're going to be dragged into this conversation. So the only thing you can do and should do is know the facts. Know the facts. Know the facts of Israel. Know how to answer when somebody says apartheid, when somebody says colonialism, when somebody says ethnic cleansing. Get back to them with dates, numbers, like without absolute, like not be triggered or upset. Acknowledge Palestinian suffering and just get back to them with the actual facts, and don't think that it's you're not going to get away with it. It's literally the reason I wrote the book. I wrote the book to give the ammunition for people like that to go out there and know that they have a way to answer, because so often they just don't know what to say. They just don't know what to say. They know that it's not true, but they're like, I don't know how to reply to this. So I would suggest that they get all the facts straight. They're reading the book. My book would probably be useful. I read it specifically. I wrote it specifically for that. So give whoever's going to college the book. There's a cheat sheet at the end. I did it on purpose. So I write this story and it's kind of intertwined with the story of my family, and it's got all the history and the facts, and it's told in a very kind of like almost like a novel-y kind of way. And then at the end, there's an appendix with literally bullet points of how it all went down. Boom, 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 like the Zionist movement and Herzl did this and that, in 1948, and no, that Israel didn't start the war. No, Israel didn't want the war. No, Israel, you know, there was attack, everything all the way to today. You can rip those 3 last pages, put them in your pocket, walk on college and be like, no, actually, that's not how it happened. And know that it's not going to be easy. But know all your facts is what I would suggest to both shlichim and college kids. And young professionals, everybody really, like.
But I would say also we want to make sure that people are listened to too, right? Because the people that disagree with us have to have a voice before we tell them you're a cheat sheet, right? You would agree with that, Noah?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. The thing is this, right? There are people on the fringes that we're never going to be able to change their mind, but the majority are not as, they can still be spoken to. So it's going to be a lot of work, but it's doable.
So the last of our 3 young leaders is Hannah, and Hannah also is a change maker. Hannah, what's your question for Noah?
I know, it's an honor to meet you. You've been really instrumental in bringing Israeli TV to America. So I wanted to ask if you think that TV can help change the narrative of Israel in America.
I think it can, and I think it already is. So with bringing in treatment, what I saw, because the television show, the content was not Israeli, I mean, it was an Israeli show, and then it was adapted to America. So it wasn't anything to do with Israel per se for the public. So the majority of the public wouldn't know that it's a show from Israel. What it did do was change the perception of Hollywood of Israel. So whereas before, people were kind of like, I don't care about Israel. It's camels or what. Yeah, I'm Jewish, but I went to day school and I don't care about, like, nobody kind of was thinking of Israel of anything other than like, oh, it's what my parents kind of forced me to do. I've never been there. So I haven't been there since I was 12 years old, and I don't particularly care. It suddenly became, oh, there's financial opportunity there. Well, let me go. Right. So the C-level executive, changed their minds on Israel quick stick. And I think now with shows like Fauda and shows like Shtiso and like all these shows that are coming out that are showing Israeli society, definitely can make a difference.
So we talked about your past. I want to talk a little bit about your future. And you are not just the multi-hyphenate that I described. You're also a mom. Yeah. And I'm wondering, how COVID has been for you as a mom and what your dreams are for your beautiful son.
Being a mother, it's all the cliches, right? When he was like, what it's like being, I'm like, it's all the cliches. You take all the cliches that people say about motherhood, you put them in one bucket. It's the greatest thing in the world. It's the most challenging thing. It's the most fun. It's the most inspiring. It's the one thing. Your heart expands, your heart doubles, you triples with a thing. I was joking that like you become a mom and you immediately get the ability to, immediately like, you don't even like learn it. Immediately it's downloaded to you, like the ability to kill. It's like if somebody like, oh my God, I'm like, it's just, I'm sure all moms now and dads are like, yeah, obviously not interested in killing anything, not even an ant. That's the tone of my voice. I hope nobody got offended by that, but, it's the greatest thing. Every night I put him down. We have these like chats, we cuddle. He's 5 years old. He jumps into pretty much every single one of my Zooms. I threatened him today. I was like, monkey, if you get into this Zoom between 5 and 6, you can't get in the room. And if you do, no iPad tonight. Like I use like the big guns because I can't. I'm like, I'll do these Zooms and he comes in and out of the office. It's just the greatest thing. It's just.
What are you going to do to make sure that
look at me? I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I'm like such a Jewish mom. I'm like,
what are you going to do to make sure that he is not getting a phone call from you on Rosh Hashanah in 20 years and he's getting ready to have sushi at Katsuya? What are you going to do differently?
Oh, wow. I'm already doing that differently. Oh my God. First of all, I want him to be healthy and happy, and then he can do whatever he wants. I have so many jokes right now, but this is recorded. I can't. I want him to be healthy and happy. And that was why, he's in a Jewish school. He goes to Israel a lot. He speaks Hebrew as his first language. Both me and his dad, he's American. Like he doesn't speak Hebrew. Like we're all, we insist with him on Hebrew. He knows he's American, Israeli, like, it's inserted into him way more than it was inserted into me. Like I've never been to the temple before I moved to LA. I've never been to temple. We just grew up in a very secular, very Zionist, but very secular family, which is okay. It's another variation of Judaism, right? Judaism comes in a lot of different ways. You don't have to be religious in a certain kind of way. Everybody has their own interpretation, but knowing your history, my history, our history is crucial for knowing yourself. So I will insert in him as much of this knowledge as I possibly can. And then I just want him to be healthy and happy.
So the JFNA,
we're going to college together, obviously.
Please. All right.
Obviously, wherever he's going to college, I'm like, where are we going? Okay, great. Yeah, I really wanted to go exactly to that city.
We want to slow the clock down so he's not going to college anytime soon. But the JFNA staff was a little uncomfortable because I don't, you know me, I don't prep for these things all that much. So they made me feel guilty, and I Googled you. Like, you should never Google your friends. I Googled you and I learned something I did not know. So you have to tell me about this. You were named one of the 50 most powerful Jews in the world. Like, I know one of the 50 most powerful Jews in the world. What is that? And what does that mean? And are you that powerful?
I'm very powerful. Be careful. I'm super powerful. I don't, it's not true. Yes, they have this list every year, and this, and it just, I had no idea. And I was, that was when, I started Act for Israel, the advocacy organization, and it just came out, and now this thing is forever in my bio, and it's great. Let's, I don't know, let's see what happens this year. But I don't, obviously I've been on a bunch of different lists, and you know what it's like. I'm not sure exactly what this means. I hope I can make a difference with this book and help people out, and help college kids out, and help young adults out, and young professionals. I just really want to make a difference. And
so you're doing a lot.
Maybe you're on the list, right? Or maybe not, but whatever.
Well, I feel like you're powerful, but you're doing a lot of these kinds of gatherings. You're really pushing the book out, which I'm really proud that you're doing. Like I said, everyone should not buy one book. They should buy five books. By the way, if you buy 5 books and you email me, I'll pay for the 5th one, right? I'll incentivize you to pay for to buy the 5th book.
Look at you. Oh my God. We have 200 people. If if everybody buys 5, that's like a lot.
Yeah. So you've been doing a lot of these things. I'm wondering what the hardest question you've been asked on these calls.
Maybe this one. Hang on. Maybe this one. Maybe this one. Maybe this one. I'll tell you why. Because this could have been it. This could have been it. And it's going to be a very tricky answer too. There are not a lot of things that I don't want to talk about. And I'm not, I don't have a problem if something comes up to be like, don't want to talk about it, but it hasn't. And especially not in this topic, even though the book goes to very personal places as well. Like I'm like, bring it on. So it's not like I have any specific place in which somebody asked me something that's difficult. I don't remember it being the case. Of course, as soon as our event ends, I'd be like, oh, that was a good one. But right now, it seems like this may be the toughest question I was asked ever, Jay.
So here's my last question before I turn it over to my colleague and dear friend, Eric Fingerhead, which is, we both also we love Israel and we love food. So I'm planning a trip to Israel, the first Federation mission out of COVID, first week of November, a major gifts mission to Israel that I'm leading. And what's your favorite restaurant in Israel?
Oh, that is the hardest question. There you go. This was it. This was it. This is it. Wow. Wait. Okay, so I talk about the hummus place in the book.
Yeah.
Abu Hassan in Jaffa. Abu Hassan in Jaffa, in terms of hummus, hands down, no question. The Dolphin Street in Jaffa. You ask for masabacha, which is a plate of food with, oh my God,
There's a little place in the Carmel market that's better, but that's just me.
But that's what I say in the book. It's like a team sport. Everyone's like, nope, this is the best place. Nope, that's the best place. Hey, I wrote the book. It's Abu Hassan. Okay, there you go. From me. So that's that. I would say, I can't tell you, look, what I say to people when they go to Israel all the time, and I'm sure everybody would relate to that. And I'm like, oh, you're going to Israel. Great. I challenge you to find a bad meal. Like, it's very hard to find a bad meal in Israel, even in like little cafes, in little like hole in the wall, in like a moshav somewhere. It's going to be great food. It's a whole country full of Jewish mothers with like farm to table built in the country, with like obsession with like cooking shows, obsession with chefs. It's like food is such a huge part of the culture there, and the melting, like the merge, like the melting pot of flavors with like, you take a gefilte fish and put some jachnun on it. It's like all these like flavors from all over the place are creating that. It's extraordinary. I can think of the miznon, Eyal Shani's miznon. Technically, everything Eyal Shani does, like put this thing in a pita, an Eyal Shani pita, and it's delicious. I love Cantina for Italian, like really basic, great Italian food. I love Yafo Tel Aviv is amazing as well. I'm gonna forget a lot, but there's,
okay.
Yeah. What's that?
I said, I agree. And obviously everyone loves Machane Yehuda.
Machane Yehuda, oh my God.
The next time you go back, my favorite restaurant is a place in Jaffa called OCD. And it's a tasting menu, a young chef, he's not even 30. And it means OCD. He actually has OCD, and that's how we named the restaurant. But it is it's the greatest restaurant, I think, in Israel right now.
Wow, I didn't even hear about it.
There you go. I shared it with you, and the people listening should not make reservations in late October, early November, because it's a small place and I want to be able to eat there. So you can go, but not then. All right, Noa, my dear.
Pua, all the market, Shuka Pishpishim, all this place, Pua and Shuka Pishpishim.
I want to tell you something. I'm not one of the 50 most powerful Jews in the world, and soon people might not remember my name, but yes, I want to thank you on behalf of the Jewish people for writing this book. it is an extraordinary contribution to Jewish life in America. It will help people understand Israel, and more importantly, it'll help people love Israel. So thank you, Toda Rabbah. And it is now my honor to introduce the guy who keeps the trains running at JFNA and who has driven us through COVID and will drive us through the future, my dear friend and colleague, Eric Fingerhut.
Jay, thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation. And thanks for all the restaurant recommendations. I will meet you there. I cannot wait to meet you at those wonderful restaurants. Jay, you're an amazing leader. And Noah, I'm blown away. I'm blown away by the book and by your passion and your contributions to this incredibly important moment in Jewish history. What a great program this has been. I am enormously proud that it is sponsored by the Jewish Federation's 146 Jewish federations across North America, all of whom are committed and every day are building flourishing Jewish communities, communities that are healthy, communities that are safe, communities that are caring, communities that are welcoming and inclusive, communities that are educated and engaged, communities that are involved in the broader community around them, and most importantly for tonight's discussion, communities that are deeply connected to Israel and to the Jewish people around the world. So how do we, as North American Jews, deeply connect to Israel? Well, Noah has given us a beautiful roadmap in her book, but I'd like to suggest it's 4 things. First of all, we have to really know each other, all the different types of Judaism that exist in Israel, all the different types of Jews that exist in North America, all of our diversity, all of our mishigas. We need to really know each other. Number 2, we need to care for each other. We need to take care of each other. This last year, we've seen extraordinary outpouring of Jewish support for each other across the globe as we've struggled with the pandemic together. We need to work together in business, work together to help build a better world. And finally, and really directly hit on in Noah's book so powerfully, we need to stand up for each other. And I want to say with great pride that the Jewish federations across North America do all these things. We help Israelis and American Jews know each other through all of the trips, immersive trips that we support, Birthright and Masa and youth group trips and Honeymoon Israel and all of these wonderful trips. We do it through the shlichim that were mentioned that we bring through our partners with the Jewish Agency to camps and to JCCs at the synagogues and to communities. We do it through partnership communities that work together to exchange people and ideas. We support the caring for Jews around the world through our partnerships with the Joint that help care for individual Jews who are in distress around the world, and with the Jewish Agency that cares for the security and the safety of Jewish communities around the world. And we are working together. We're working together for service programs, the Shalom Corps, JDC Entwine, the program 10 that brings us to non-Jewish communities all around the world in Africa, South America, to care for the communities. And finally, the Jewish Federation system stands up for Israel all across our communities. We do it through our Israel Action Network that helps mobilize responses to some of the things that Noah talked about, the BDS movements on campus, but also in our communities, unfortunately, in churches and in labor unions and all of the various parts of our civil society where we need to stand up. We stand up by helping bring and support the Hillels and the Israel Fellows on campus that are leading the fights that Noah spoke about. We stand up in the Congress and in the state legislatures advocating for bills that oppose BDS and that oppose anti-Semitism, support the international definitions of anti-Semitism, no hate acts, fight hate crimes, in all the various ways. Noah's book helps us in all of the ways the Jewish federations stand up for Israel here in North America. And for that reason, we are so grateful for her contributions. You know, one of my favorite songs is Benny Friedman's famous Yesh Tikva, yes, there's hope. And one of my favorite line in one of my favorite songs, he sings Al Tidag Al tifchad ki nitzad yad biyad. Don't worry, don't be afraid, because we stand hand in hand. That is our goal, the Jewish Federation, is to make sure that the Jewish community in North America stands hand in hand with our beloved, wonderful state of Israel and the Israeli civil society. Noah, thank you for helping us understand better how we can do that. Jay, thank you for helping us bring this conversation to life. Thanks for all of you for participating in this program this evening. Erev Tov. Have a good evening.
Shiru, Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai.